Hey, David.
Hey, easy, and wow, a bonus podcast
Oh,
because it's
yeah.
Canadian Whiskey Week.
Woo!
So this has been started up by our friend Reece Sims in Canada, surprisingly enough, and you can find out more at CanadianWhiskeyWeek.com. But anyway, it's this week. It's the 13th to the 19th of January. This is the first time it's happened. I'm surprised there's not been something before, but this is the first time. There is a hashtag somewhere as well, isn't it? It's a hashtag CAD like Canada, but sort of Canada,
Uh-huh.
Canada, like short Canada. CAD, CAD Whiskey Week, all one word with no E in the whiskey. So there we
Yeah, definitely no E.
go. Anyway, it's just a celebration of, it's as I said, the first year of whiskey from Canada. Take a picture, do a blog post, whatever you want to do. Hashtag CAD Whiskey Week. No E in that whiskey. Anyway, so we thought we would have a bit of a chat and a bit of a taste of a few things. I'm in the UK, and what we get here is very, very limited. So I went to the supermarket today, see what they had, and I could only find this, which is there you go, the classic
Yep,
Canadian Club,
Canadian
which I
Club.
believe originally is American, and was moved over production to the US for during Prohibition or in the run up to Prohibition
Oh,
or something like
moved to
that.
Canada?
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Um, it at one time had a Royal Warrant. I was reading.
Oh, that's
So
very
we'll have a taste
nice.
of this. This is one of the first North American whiskies I think I ever tried. Because there was a time where other than maybe like Jack Daniels, you pretty much just couldn't get anything, but you could get this. This seems to be consistently around somewhere or other. So it's a blended whiskey. Um,
Yeah, so one
very
of
much
the,
forty
sorry, I was
percent.
just going to say, one of the interesting things about Canadian whiskey is that there are no like subtype
No, it's one type.
definitions in the law. It's just all Canadian whiskey. So you
Yep.
have like how long it's supposed to be aged, I believe, and bottling strength and stuff like that. But there's no definition for like Canadian single malt or Canadian rye or Canadian corn whiskey, say. It's all just Canadian whiskey. Now you can choose to add on other elements, call it a single malt, call it a rye whiskey, but it's all just under the law Canadian whiskey. So
Yeah.
that's one of the kind of I think interesting things because most other countries that do whiskey or codify whiskey
They love
have
the they love the
specific.
definitions. More classifications.
Yeah,
More
yeah,
categories.
yeah. I don't
Subcategories.
know. Maybe it's because the
Subcategories.
maybe it's because the Canadians are more relaxed, or
It's
the
like,
government
it's
just,
whiskey.
or
Do you
just
enjoy it?
like,
There we go.
yeah, yeah, or maybe the
What we do
government
know,
just trusts that people aren't going to lie about what's in the whiskey. Yeah, I don't
simpler
know.
times. There you go.
Yeah, maybe.
What we know though, because it's got whiskey, we're getting it in the UK. It's at least 3 years old because
Yeah,
that's the rule
yeah.
for selling it here. This is 40% ABV, but interestingly, in Australia and New Zealand, they get it at 37%, which I think is a little bit. I mean, you can't get it. 40% is the minimum for whiskey as well, but
Yeah,
37%. So
yeah.
um, it says smooth and oaky on the label to give you an idea.
Right.
A lot of vanilla, toffee, and then some sort of like dried peanuts. So not like salted or roasted, just like the
Uh huh.
blanched.
Yeah.
And a little blanched almond there takes you back, doesn't it? Easy, dry blanched almond.
Yeah.
And then to taste some sort of a little like toffee apple, maybe something like that. Some sort of brown sugar, caramel chocolate, and then a reasonably dry finish. Actually, it definitely feels a bit crisper, a little bit more refined and cleaner um, than the rye whiskies that we might be drinking, or bourbons or something like that. I mean, but it just certainly seems that it leans towards that sort of crispness that you might get with some vodkas. Anyway, I'm
Yeah.
gonna have a little drink with this. I'm gonna
Ooh.
match my Canadian Club with my Schweppes ginger ale, but of course, originally it used to be Canada Dry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So this is I'm just gonna
So I
put it
have
in my
a
tasting glass.
Canadian blended whiskey as well. I got a Pendleton, and it's the nose is fairly light. It's just there's like just a touch of oak, a little like a faint vanilla sweetness, and that's kind of it on the nose. On the palate, really soft vanilla, little good. It's got structure to it from the oak, but I mean, like what you've done is, with mixing, like the blended Canadian whiskeys are really like champions of mixed
Yeah,
drinks.
it's. I mean, it's very very Moorish. I mean, I've finished that one already. It doesn't have, there's no deep complexity, but it's just a drink. Just
Yeah,
you don't really want to be challenged. You don't want to be thinking about it too much. That whiskey and ginger, very nice. Good, it reminds me a bit of brandy and ginger, so like the horse's neck, where you might have
yeah,
that big swirl of lemon. And just very very easy to drink.
yeah.
You're not even really thinking about it. It's almost like drinking a soft drink.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try it with the old sparkling water as well,
All right.
because that's another good choice. Yeah, so it's a good sort of workhorse whiskey.
Yeah.
Available, pretty cheap. Um, it's going to mix with a lot of different things. I think a lot of them like sodas or whatever you want. So
When my dad was younger, in his before he was married, in his disco days, he drank quite a bit of Canadian whiskey. He was a fan of Crown Royal,
yep,
and
the little bag.
on yeah, he I still have one of the little bags he kept.
So many of those little bags looking around.
Yeah, he would drink that on the rocks, or he would get 7 and 7, so Seagram
Ah,
7 and 7 Up.
so I recently wrote about whiskey in the movies, and Seven and Seven is in a few films. Um, Most notably, it's asked for a lot in Goodfellas. Um,
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's the right time period.
yeah, I feel like there's a few times, and I know certainly Joe Pesci's character has it. So I've not got with me here Seagram Seven, but that's essentially another similar to this. Similar to this is another blended whiskey. So I've got
Mm-hmm.
my glass here. I'm going to make a sort of. I'm going to use. I got the Seven Up here. Um, what I found seems to be the trick to making a good 7 and 7 is having the crushed ice, or at least sort of vaguely crushed ice, as mine is
Yeah, yeah.
here. If you just have if you have really big ice or even cubes, it doesn't really work. You need to have that slight sort of slushiness.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, I think even though we've not got it here, to my memory, that I'd much rather drink the Canadian Club than the Seagrams. Seagrams one just seemed so much like heavier on the wood, but like
Oh,
less less balanced, basically. So that's you sort of. I mean, there's a lot of ice in there, so you get an idea on the levels, and then you just have that sort of dash of your 7 Up there, and that's it. You might want to put a cherry in there if you fancy it, but
yeah, yeah,
and again, very easy to drink, but it's kind of like you're not drinking.
yeah.
There's no resistance. It's just very, very easy. You can sit there drinking one after another and not worry. And of course, the other thing is it's very easy to make. So even after you've had a few, you,
Right.
you can probably still make it. So be careful.
So in that small glass you have, would you say it's like 50-50 or one part the three?
It's probably somewhere between 50-50 and it might be
Uh
slightly more. It might be like 60-40, maybe something
huh.
like that. Um, but when I've experimented with the levels and done it like more like I would do a gin tonic, I find I need a lot more dilution, although it doesn't seem to work. But when you have this sort of ice and the ice is adding that dilution as well, you seem to be able to get away with a more equal sort of pour. But
Yeah.
still, you can't really, it's slightly woody, citrusy, tasty, slightly sweet, refreshing.
Yeah.
Watch out.
Yeah. Easy to drink a lot of them, probably.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well,
Um, yeah,
have you
please.
got some other whiskeys too?
I have got one other one. So this is new from that boutique whiskey company. So this is 700 mils. It's 45.8, and this is an 8-year-old corn whiskey from Canada that is finished in a sherry cask. This is part of their new core range. So previously it had been released, or something similar had been released as a smaller, just like the one-offs that they do as an independent bottler, and that was a higher ABV. It was like 51.8 or something. So this is it's still respectable. It's still 45, but this is now something that you should be able to get all the time. It's about £36. Bearing in mind it's an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
The Canadian club was 23 when I bought it today. So
I mean, that sounds like a good deal.
yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah. So
So, one of
um,
the other interesting things about Canadian whiskey that I learned was that, at least for the large distilleries, a lot of them will individually ferment and distill and age single grains, and then they will often blend them together. So one of the reasons why you can have an 8-year-old corn whiskey is whatever distillery they got it from likely has a wheat whiskey they distill, a rye whiskey they distill, a corn whiskey they distill, and a malt whiskey. And then
ah,
for the blended products, they mix those together in the proportions that they want. But then they have all those individual casks, which is how Whistle Pig was able to get 10-year-old 100% rye whiskey from Alberta, years ago when they started, is because they had all this individual
that
distilled
sort of
grains
fractional
and
approach to it.
aged.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So whereas like in the US, it's much more common to have mixed grain
The
mashes.
mash bill, yeah, of course,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
This is it's slightly confectionery on the nose. It reminds me of rum toffees, so sort of like they're like a hard, chewy candy, but they're rum flavored, and you get this sort of rum flavoring. You get some rum truffles have the same sort of thing, so it's a sort of buttery rum note. There's some red fruitiness to it as well, and almost like a slight salinity. It's quite. It's not overly sweet or anything. It's quite engaging, and that follows through on the palate. Definitely, you're getting the sherry there. Those that are very sensitive to sulfur might get a little upset by this, but I actually think it's quite nice. We have friends that get
Yes.
very sensitive, and I am picking up a little bit, as you often do, with the
Yeah.
sherry cask. Um, and it's quite warming. I mean, for the 45.8, it's got some heat to it. It's not really a burn, but it definitely gives you a warmth. I think it'll be quite nice in a hip flask. Actually, I think you've got
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
some potential there, but very sippable. Be nice with some ice. We'll try it with some soda or something in a sec. So, how about you, Easy? What else you got?
One other I got, actually, Reese gave this to me, so I'm very thankful for that. It's Monashee. It's a Triticale whiskey. So Triticale is a hybrid of rye and wheat. So that's been distilled and then aged minimum of 3 years, obviously. Yep, just says aged in new oak 3 years, pot distilled. So I've been enjoying it. As you can see, it's about half done, and
You're
I've
getting close to that point where it's going to be drink up time.
yeah. Well, I've been enjoying it. This is bottled at 45% alcohol, but you wouldn't know it.
Huh.
It is so soft. It's been really lovely. I've had some Triticale whiskeys before, and they've been from the US, and they've been much more aggressive. Maybe it's because they were in new charred oak. I don't know if this was charred or not, doesn't say. but it's very lovely. It's got this really great fruity aroma to it. It's got like nectarine and plum, and it's got some sweetness to it.
It strikes me as you're saying all these things is that there really is this. I think particularly now
Yeah,
that there's this really wide gambit of what Canadian whiskey is, and it's almost
right.
quite difficult to say this is what Canadian whiskey is.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Especially
which
now,
I
like
think is
this is a
quite
much
interesting.
smaller distillery.
Yeah,
So, there was a time where you had just a few major
yeah.
Canadian
I mean,
whiskey distillers,
you
and
have
they were
stuff
all,
like this, and you think, oh, Canadian whiskey, it's a bit lighter, and
yeah,
but
yeah.
you can't say that because
No,
that's true of this and maybe some other blends that were prevalent.
yeah,
When you're getting products like that, they're totally different. And products like this corn whiskey over here, they are totally different.
yeah.
Which means that there's probably something for everyone, which is good.
Yeah, and that's one of the, I think, exciting things because, like you said, for years, Canadian whiskey was known for their blends, meant for mixing with soda or 7 Up, things like that. Easy to drink, meant as like a lighter style for cocktails. But today, there's a lot of really fun Canadian whiskeys coming out, and some of those uh, heritage, we'll call them distillers in Canada, are putting out more interesting products. They're not just doing their blends anymore. One of my favorites recently has been the cask strength Alberta Premium rye whiskey, 100% rye. It's like 68% alcohol. It's fantastic. It is amazingly delicious. And it's not crazy expensive. I think it's like $60, something like that. And just so I think that's one of the great things is that Canadian whiskey is really diversifying. So there's lots of fun stuff to try.
Mm. And some of these other like I think I tried the 100% Canadian Club, the 100%
Yeah.
rye, and I know that Crown Royal do one as
Yeah.
well.
There's a Crown Royals is called Northern Harvest. It's a
Northern
ninety
Harvest,
ten.
that's the one. Yeah, very good.
Yeah. So, I'm interested to hear what you thought of the Canadian Club 100. I bought a bottle a few years ago, partly because I liked the Crown Royal
Yeah,
90% rye so much. I thought, oh, well, the Canadian Club has one. I opened it a few years ago, and to me, it tasted distinctly of maple syrup. It was very, very sweet. And I was just like, okay, I mean, it was fine. It didn't have as much rye character in my
how
mind
interesting.
as
Yeah.
I would have hoped for, but that again goes back to one of the interesting things about the Canadian rules for whiskey is they're allowed to add like wine and other spirits in up to a certain percentage. I don't remember what the percentage is. It's like 7.5% or something like
Oh,
that. It's quite large. Um, and so you can have these other flavors kind of creep in from other sources, but most of them don't really do that anymore. But it's part of the rule still.
yeah.
So I
I don't
wondered if it was maybe
I
it was
don't
something like
recall
that.
that, but it was such a long time ago. I didn't maybe think I need to try it again. I did try. What was it I tried? Was I think Crown Royal do they do some sort of single malt or something like that? Some sort of malt?
Yeah, yeah, I vaguely remember that. They had like so Crown Royal has a huge lineup and they have all their flavored stuff which is super popular here in the US. And but they did do something that was like oh, they did one that was like a bourbon mash, I believe, is what they called it.
Yeah,
And there
it's a
might have been a
silvery
single
one.
malt.
Yeah, single malt. Yeah, Crown Royal single malt. I remember having. I think I actually picked that up maybe on my last trip over to the US.
Hmm.
Maybe the trip before.
Yeah.
Yeah, single malt. Yeah, 45%. Don't know too much more on the details of that, but I remember trying. It wasn't. It couldn't have been hideously expensive. Um,
No.
and but I do remember trying. I do remember quite. I think. I mean, I probably just had it with soda. It was probably just something that we had in the hotel room to have a drink when it's late and you get back, or something like that, or when it's early.
Yeah. It's always late somewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I think it's interesting, and I think like it's interesting to try these things, and some of the even some of the flavored versions of the Crown Royal have been quite nice. Some haven't. Some I thought were awful. I think maybe like the peach one I seem to recall was pretty good.
Peach is, I think, one of their biggest sellers. I
Yeah, you
maybe
find the right
apple
mixer with
too.
that, and you're kind of, I think you
Yeah,
just had
yeah.
it with like some iced tea or something like that, and
Oh yeah. Yeah, peach
no
iced
brainer.
tea with a little whiskey kick, basically.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, and certainly some of the RTDs that they've done, specifically Crown Royal ones, I think have been pretty good. So,
Yeah.
my sherry whiskey with the soda, not to my taste.
Mm.
It was it's too with just sparkling water or seltzer water, whatever you want to call it. It's just too dry, and it brings out a lot more of the sherry, and it's not really.
Uh-huh.
It's a little. It's just dry, basically. But with a bit of the Seven Up, um, yeah, I don't really like that
Well,
either.
that's
We'll keep searching. I mean, it's
yeah.
nice to have on it. Maybe with the sherry, maybe we move more towards like a Manhattan or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
That
that
might
was
be
my thinking. Since it's like corn base, maybe more of an old
maybe
fashioned
we can do something like
Manhattan
that.
cocktail
Yeah.
would it be a better fit?
Um, there'll be something somewhere.
Yeah.
Just gotta keep searching. Well, I think that's a whistle stop tour of the Canadian whiskey that we could scrounge together in a couple
Yeah.
of days. So it is Canadian Whiskey Week.com.
Yep.
That's right. It is hashtag CAD Whiskey Week. Whiskey doesn't have an E in it. It's all one word.
Mm.
Hashtag CAD Whiskey Week. Many thanks to Reese for doing this organisation for the week. These things take a lot of work, and I think it's impressive for people to do these things.
Yeah.
And hopefully we will see us again for the second year of Canadian whiskey.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll
That'd be
have
great.
something a little bit more coherent. But anyway, if you can, get hold of some Canadian whiskey, try it responsibly,
Yep.
and get your friends to try it as well.
There you go.
Thanks,
All right.
Eric.
All right. Great chatting with you.
See
Bye
you
bye.
later.